Today we're going to wrap up our examination of the principles of the Constitution. So far we've looked at things like separation of powers and checks and balances, then we examined limited government and judicial review. And the last points that we want to make, the last principles of the Constitution that we want to look at, are the ways that we change the Constitution. And let's start with this quote from Thomas Jefferson. He said, "The Constitution belongs to the living, not the dead." Jefferson was of the mindset that each generation might need to change the Constitution, write their own. We've been very fortunate, though, that we haven't had to do that. And the reason for that is not only do we have a formal amendment process that we'll discuss in a little bit, but we also have these informal ways of changing the Constitution. And there are a couple things that need to be looked at. Understand, first and foremost, the Constitution itself is a very vague document with details that needed to be added in later. And some of the ways that we've added in those details have been through these informal changes here. So I want to highlight first, we'll talk about court decisions. Now, when the Supreme Court makes a ruling, you end up getting some very new interpretations on the Constitution. I'm going to give you an example of Plessy v. Ferguson. What you had with Plessy v. Ferguson was a court case where the Supreme Court decided that African Americans were not considered people, and that separate facilities are inherently equal in the minds of the court. So that was an interpretation of the Constitution and the worth of an individual. Fast forward to the start of the Civil Rights Movement, and you have the court case of Brown v. Board. This court case comes forward and says that separate facilities are inherently unequal, and that when you have separate facilities, you are infringing upon a person's rights. So this changes the Constitution. This changes the constitutional definition of facilities and what is right and what is fair. So that is a big change to the Constitution without any wording differing in the Constitution. You can apply this to numerous court cases. Roe v. Wade interprets into the Constitution the idea of a right to privacy. Those words, right to privacy, do not appear in the document, but they do now that the court has seen in Roe v. Wade that that is a protected right. We'll move on to customs here. Now, customs, we have things like the cabinet, not part of the original Constitution, but these advisors to the president are part of our system. We have the idea of committees in Congress having so much power, not part of our Constitution, but part of our system now. Or the party conventions. Every 4 years we have a big nominating convention for the presidential candidates from each party. Political parties were never mentioned in the Constitution, but now they're part of our system. And lastly, we'll talk about events. And things like presidents using their war powers to expand. FDR in World War II, great expanses of presidential power. So these are some of the things that happen in our society that end up making our government and our Constitution different. Now, in addition, you have a very formal way of amending the Constitution, and it's a federalist process. I want to emphasize this part here. The Constitution's way of being amended is a very federalist system, meaning that it balances the states and the national government. So we've got national government represented over here in the form of our Capitol building image. And understand that all proposals to the Constitution need to start with Congress. And that's a 2/3 vote. What you have is that 2/3 of Congress needs to propose an amendment, or 2/3 of the states require that Congress hold a constitutional convention. If that is done, then we move forward to the ratification stage, and that's where the states come in. And the threshold here is 3/4. 3/4 of the states must agree. And they usually do that through state legislatures. The state legislatures usually sign off on an amendment. When that is done, the amendment is ratified, and it is now part of the Constitution. But it's a 2-step process. You have to have proposal, and you have to have ratification. If you don't have both of those, then you do not move forward with the constitutional amendment. And usually after an amendment has been proposed in Congress, you end up getting the 3/4 vote within 7 years. There's a 7-year time limit in order to get the amendment formally added to the Constitution and to change the wording.